and we will indicate that we'll get the report, and I understand the House is to meet at 2 o'clock. We will table the report, and the House will then move to approve it. I would just say that I indicated to the clerk earlier this week that we wanted to ensure that we had social distancing of members. Mr. Dunn has made an extra effort to distance, social distances. No. But we are, as best as we can under the circumstances, dealing with it. I have been assured, I inquired and I was assured by the orderly that in the mornings the House of Parliament is wiped down and disinfected. There was a special request from the upstairs to make sure that upstairs on both sides of the gallery were also wiped down, and I just asked the clerk to ensure that this is also done. Members, the Minister of Finance has also indicated that given the extent of the COVID response, that it will occasion in early April, at the very start of the financial year, that we have another meeting such as this to deal with a first supplementary. I think this in history will be the earliest that we are having any supplementary, certainly in what could be the first or second week of the financial year, but we understand that it will be necessary. So we have given an assurance on behalf of our committee that we stand ready to meet as soon as the minister has put in place the paperwork for the first supplementary of 2020-21. Members, before we call in the guests, there are two matters that I would like to raise amongst members that I think that we need to address. A letter, at the last meeting, we sent out a letter to the Ministry of Industry, Commerce, Agriculture and Fisheries, read the RADA roads. There are a lot of RADA roads being put in the program. We had gotten in previous sittings of this committee, we had gotten an assurance from the ministry that when these roads were being done, that consultation, as is the norm, would take place with the members of parliament, and that the members of parliament, before a selection was taken, would sit with the RADA officers, determine what are the roads, look at some priorities, and we could indicate what our priorities were, what the RADA priorities are, because quite frankly, the farmers, when they have a problem, they come to us, the members of parliament. We have to be involved in the selection process and the discussion for sure. And this is a time-honored practice. To that end, at the last meeting, we asked the RADA to send us a list of the process, the procedure to select the roads, and indicated to them that we would like for that in that discussion that the members of parliament, because too often when it comes to this meeting, members of parliament on both sides bring issue, and then we're making the changes after the fact. It's not a proper consultative process. The procedure that was sent to us seems to omit to some extent the input of the member of parliament, certainly when I look at the procedure. Therefore, I think, members, I bring it to your attention. I think it's important. I'm hoping the members took the opportunity to look at it, and I would like for us to have a determination from the committee on how we will treat with this matter, given the fact that there's a substantial amount of money that will be placed in RADA roads this year, and I do believe that the consultation should be taking place now. So I turn it over to members for their comments. Member Dunn? You try the one. Turn off the other one first.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, maybe you can move over. Yes.
Right. I do concur with your sentiments, and I recall from the discussions that we had before that the Member of Parliament should be integrally involved in the selection. So looking at the process flow diagram that they have sent, funds are allocated in one from MOF, and then two, it says Agricultural Extension Officer conducts a survey of farm road in his or her area and complete the template. No, is Agricultural Extension Officer conducts a survey in consultation with the Member of Parliament. So in their process flow, we need to ensure that they adjust this process flow to reflect on documents and on paper the Member of Parliament's input, and therefore from henceforth there can be no confusion as far as the Member of Parliament's position on this.
Absolutely.
Chairman, I concur with Member Dunn. We may have to ask that this process be suspended until we get some better clarification, because we cannot leave out the input of the member of Parliament, which is so critical to the support of the program. And so this cannot be allowed to go through without the input of the Member of Parliament.
Yes, Member Dalrymple, I know you're a little late, but we're making the point that we had asked the RADA and the Ministry of Agriculture to indicate to us a process by which the RADA roads are selected. And in the process, what they have sent back to us omits the input of the members of Parliament. And what has happened here is that every time a list comes in, there's a long debate by members of Parliament on both sides. And then we all receive calls from members of Parliament outside of the committee who also have their problems, because where you have roads that are dedicated to farmers, when the farmers have a problem with the roads, they on your phone quarreling about it, and then if when the roads are being selected, you are not part of the process. It makes no sense. It makes a mockery of you being representative of the people.
I want to thank you very much, and I want to concur with everything. It seems that RADA is on a trip of their own. I had to call my own RADA person in Trelawney because they have stuff and they're distributing, and they say, and I want to make it known because mine tells me that he got a directive to distribute immediately, and you don't know, even if they are distributing, I say it is your constituency. You don't call and say you have 900 bags of fertilizer that you're giving out. In my constituency, which is farming, they give it out and I didn't know. So I want to concur with you. RADA needs to know. And whoever are the top people at RADA, they need to filter it down to the offices, that when things come to RADA for farmers, they must make the Member of Parliament aware that they have it. I support it wholeheartedly.
And member, part of the problem is when you don't do things like that, you duplicate, triplicate, it becomes a very untidy
Exactly
situation.
so. And in fact, as I told mine, sometimes their own people who distribute it to various people. You wonder, sometimes you pick up a name and the person is not a farmer, but they've got things. It must be made known to the members of Parliament. I'm supportive of it, and I've had the same experience.
Members, I on your behalf, with regard to this, it is intention. I think the committee should write to RADA and indicate that prior to the formulation of any list, the members of Parliament must be consulted on what is intended. And secondly, and I think as importantly, if we look at the list, which was another reason we had it, when you look at what they have as farm roads, they indicate unpaved roads and parochial roads. Quite frankly, We have some roads, for example, in my constituency, there's a road which is known as a NWA road. It's not an unpaved or a parochial road, but the road to Jerusalem Mountain. Jerusalem Mountain is one of my main farming communities, and what has happened is that I'm being battered because there are no funds to fix the road. If you say to me which road would be a priority, it is one of my main priorities, and yet there's a problem with RADA. When I spoke to the head of RADA in my parish and to the officers, they all concur that this road would be a priority. However, it may be that the legislation that we have here or the rules that they follow omit what is an important part. And remember, Don, we had a little discussion before, and I would enjoy, and you had made a suggestion. Rather, roads should be selected based on their importance to farmers rather than the type of road it is. And I suggest that we recommend to Parliament and to the ministry that this be part of the process, because we as parliamentarians can set rules, and then when they do a main road and the Auditor General jumps all over them, then it becomes an issue. We need to set the regulations to follow the desires of what would be the best practices for our constituents. So I am suggesting that we move to ask the ministry or recommend to the ministry that this change be done, A, and that B, once that's done, that a list of priorities be done, consultation with the member of parliament. 99% of the time you're going to come out with an answer if you do the thing the right way. Remember, Don?
Well, you know, Chairman, looking at this document, the report, on the second page, where it says qualification of roads, how does one define a farm road? And I guess the Auditor General maybe would have, the method of selecting a road was indicated here, but the response to the Auditor General is what they should take note of. It says, the selection of a road for repairs is therefore aligned with the function rather than the classification. That was Rada's answer. So it ties in what you said a while ago, but now we need to ensure that this also was legislated.
So members, I think we're all of one accord that the two recommendations that have been made, that we send them as a recommendation to Parliament, A, and B, as a recommendation to the Ministry of Agriculture as to how the roads should be done in the first place, and to amend the roads to being the type, the use of the road, rather than the nomenclature of the road, which is creating a bit of a problem.
Chair, perhaps that we can use the approach, because I believe we are going to the point where we're setting up the single road authority, and that should just eliminate this need for any description as to what is farm road, what is parochial, or what is a main road. I think it's really a waste of resources. I can relate one of my personal experiences. Just recently, RADA took the middle of what can properly described as a farm road. And so the entrance to the road is not done. The inside is done, and the end of the road is not done. So so we have to get to that point where it doesn't matter how much is needed, and once the single authority has control of it, then we really ought not to be worried about the description, the heading that we put on it, whether it is a farm, and more we go to the use of the road, which will help them to determine how much money is placed on it. Because you may not want to put a double surface road in an area where it is not necessary, and that will be something left to the authorities.
To the technocrats, absolutely. Turn on your mic, please.
Until the one road authority comes into play,
yes,
we have to take this step now.
Of indicating to RADA.
That's right.
Yeah. So we will deal with that. and send we'll ask the clerk to write to the ministry, and we'll report it to Parliament. There is a second issue, members, that I have thought about and I would like to recommend to this committee. Over the last 2 weeks, we have received the information from the UDC and from the developers of Moon Palace that the proposed development at the Rooms Hotel will not proceed. There were a number of reasons stated, and there's a lot of discussion out in the space that on one side it was because of statements made, and on the other side it is that there was a performance bond put in place that work was supposed to start, I think, next month, which would be difficult in this period of time. Regardless of whatever the reason, it is that the rooms project by Moon Palace will not continue. Now, as a former Minister of Tourism, I was very involved with them. I have found the family to be a good family. It's a good brand name, and it was a development that I'd had discussions with. I thought it would have been a good development. So it's something I think we all wanted to see happen. But now it is not happening for whatever reason. I think it's important for the people of Jamaica to have a clear understanding of what went wrong with the whole rooms deal. So we are on emergency only basis now. We will only be meeting for emergencies, but I'm going to recommend to the committee that as soon as we resume, that we invite the UDC and all those related to indicate to us what the process over the entire process, what took place, to give us a fulsome report so that we can at least look at it and have a discussion with them to ensure that whatever may have gone wrong in this process does not happen again. So it's the intention to ask the clerk to write to UDC for a fulsome report, and I would say to the members that as soon as we do resume normal operations, that at the first meeting that we would invite them to have a discussion with us on this.
Chairman, I'm just recalling, I thought that it was in the printed media, it was there, that they had written, I'm not sure if the attorneys had written to say they were withdrawing because they did not want to be caught up in any political discussions or so. So I'm wondering what else are we going to want to find out here at the PAC? Because I know there was a fulsome thing in the papers. I know it has been discussed, and I'm not sure, and I stand to be corrected, but I thought I saw or read somewhere some time ago where the attorneys had said on their behalf that their clients did not wish to get involved in anything that like a political football. So I'm wondering where we're going.
I could answer. Member Don?
Right.
Yeah, you'd want to say something? Yeah, go ahead.
Based on what we have seen in the paper as well, I mean, what Member Dalrymple said is the gist of what I've gotten from the letter that was published. So I would believe maybe the purpose of a meeting like that is to ensure that, the discussion that surrounds major project like these that has such great importance to Jamaica maybe needs to be done in a different manner, and so unless that is the purpose of a meeting of the PAC, to look at how we tackle these major projects, even although there may be issues with them, that we could find a proper way to handle these, and that Jamaica and Jamaicans at the end of it does not, benefit from things like that. I mean, I was very disappointed. I can tell you that the hundreds of thousands of persons that would have been employed in this project is just not going to get that job.
Yeah, but
I agree with that. No, I'm just wondering. No, just on a follow-up to him. I agree with what the member is saying, but I'm looking at our purpose. What is our remit? To look at how funds were spent? Were any funds spent? I'm just wondering, because there's so much on our plate, and if it has been said and there's no more, I'm wondering.
Member Dalrymple, the issue is this. There was a development that was projected to take place at the rooms. UDC were the owners, and a transaction took place with Moon Palace. Moon Palace is a very valid partner to us here in Jamaica, and we all share the same sentiment, and we would like to see that development take place. The issue arose not out of political pronouncements. There was a report from the contractor general which indicated certain things with procedures, which when that came out, discussions in the public sphere took place about that. Now, that having taken place, at the end of the day, for whatever reason, this development is not going forward. Number two, we need to know what UDC plans to do next. We need to know what the cost of the termination will be. But more importantly, what Member Dunn just said, we need to go through the process to ensure that whatever went wrong never happens again, where we lose future development. So we that deal with efficiency as a committee of government, we are going to have to look at the process and see what went wrong and determine what recommendations we can make to ensure that this doesn't happen again.
Chairman, as part of what you're suggesting, the approach we take, do we propose to call the owners, well, the would-be purchasers? Because we will be given a lopsided view of what things are. So if we do not intend to call the potential purchasers, the would-be developers, I could hardly see it making sense, because so may I suggest that as part of that, if we intend at all to make it make sense, that we issue subpoenas for those purchasers, for them to come here and let us elicit from them the real reasons why it is that they have made the decision that they have made.
Let me say this. I am mindful that we have persons in the private sector that do business with the government. If the owners of Moon Palace would want to come and make a decision or a discussion or to make a statement, please let me finish. Hold on, let me finish. Member, please, let me just finish, and then I'm saying that if they would like to, I think we would have no problem with it. I think it would be an unfortunate precedent for us to be seeking to subpoena a member of the private sector at this point, because it would make persons uncomfortable with the system. Now, I make the point that the role of government and the procedures in government and the rules and laws that we have make for the government to protect the interest of the people. It is not the job of the person negotiating on the other side to do so. It is a role of government. So our job is to really look at it and have a discussion. If, and I would say this, members, if coming out of the discussion in the first instance when we hear from those technocrats, it is deemed necessary, then I will go with the will of the committee. But I would urge that in the first case scenario, that this may not be the
Let me just say, Chairman, I wouldn't want you to regard it as an unfortunate precedent. The UK, which we regard as a guardian of all that is good and robust in a democracy, they're the gatekeepers for all of that. You know, it was in 2018 that they brought in the entire management group from Sports Direct, who had been conducting their business in a particular way. And they said, listen, we need to understand from you because you're going to impact upon our labor laws. So don't regard it as an unfortunate. It would be, I think, absolutely necessary for us to bring them, for us to start establishing in our own place what it is that we expect of persons who are going to be operating in a commercial space.
Member Dunn?
Chairman, if I was that private entity, I would not want to come, because as the letter said, that they don't want to get caught up in the cut and thrust of our local system. So while inviting them would give us an opportunity to hear every side, but if it was me, I know I would not come because I don't want to get involved in that. What needs to happen, Chairman, is that we all need to understand that we're Jamaicans, and while we might have different views on different sides, the conduct of ourselves, as it affects investment opportunities, as it affects security issues, as it affects the day-to-day life of the ordinary Jamaican, is what must be paramount to us at all times. Not the way in which sometimes we take on these national issues, and it's the maturity of the political process I believe that we need to have. When these major developments or any development, as a matter of fact, that has an impact on this country and the people of this country, we need to look into ourselves and decide how do we handle this discussion so that we do not have another Moon Palace issue occurring in this country.
Yes, go ahead.
I was wondering why you seem to be selectively avoiding me from speaking.
I know you constantly say that you're being victimized in this committee. I think you're about to take it up at a higher.
I wanted to move it to the full house to hope I can get some redress.
I'm going to appoint Mr. Campbell as your attorney.
And I will feel that my faith will be properly protected there.
Oh, you're so kind.
Yes.
Chairman, the discussion on the matter with Moon Palace. Two things I just want to make quickly. You touched on it before in terms of the processes involved regarding UDC and the transaction. We have an obligation as a Parliament of the House to ensure that the processes are in keeping with statutory stipulation. So the Auditor General makes report on it. We have a duty to make sure that they are ensuring proper efficiency and effectiveness in the agency. So separate and apart from what is being said, why we have a duty to do that. The second point, I hear much being said about don't want to lose investment and all of that. The age that we are living in this world, we don't want Jamaica to be seen as a rogue country in terms of processes that are involved in development by whoever it happens to be, whoever the person or the developer is. We have a duty to make sure that the processes are transparent and accountability prevails so that Jamaica remains open to the entire world for doing business. All kinds of investment can come, but there's a due process that we must always seek to adhere to. The Parliament of the country, I believe, has that foremost responsibility on behalf of the people of the country regardless of the government of the day.
All right, members, having taken all into consideration, let us indicate to the clerk that a letter be sent to UDC for them to give us a fulsome report. We will have further meetings before we can have a discussion as to how we will deal with it, but for now we'll deal with the UDC and look at the terms and conditions. Could I get an approval for the committee for that, and then we can proceed? And as I said, we will not be taking this until after the emergency has terminated. All right, members, we have kept the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Health, and Economic Growth, which were the only ones that I required for today, and I indicated that 2 persons from each would be sufficient, and I've indicated to them that they can social distance as they feel is important. And members, given the fact that we have kept them waiting a bit with this internal discussion, as important as it was, I would urge my members to for us to be as expeditious as possible, concise as possible in our deliberations today. Yes, and members, this is your brief. Where is? Where is it? And this is a brief from them. Yes, and I would indicate too that you can distance yourselves as much as is possible. Yes. All right. Members, we have with us today the Ministry of Finance and Public Service. We also have Ministry of Economic Growth, and I understand we have the Ministry of Health. Am I correct? That's it. Good. And we are going to take the 3rd supplementary estimate. So without going any further, I would say FS, Jared, I think you're all experts at it now. So I turn over to you if you want to just carry us through the...
Thank you, Chair. Good morning.
Oh yes, I'm being asked by the stenographer that you, whoever is speaking, if you can just state your name and title for the records.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Darlene Morrison, Ministry of Finance and Public Service, Financial Secretary. So the second supplementary estimates for 2019-20, which was approved by the House in February 2020, provided for total central government expenditure of $859 billion, comprised of non-debt expenditure, $541.4 billion, which is further broken down as above-the-line expenditure of $505.9 billion, and below-the-line expenditure of $35.5 billion. Public debt service of $317.6 billion. The 3rd supplementary, tabled yesterday, reflects total central government expenditure, also of $859 billion. So the overall expenditure has not changed from what was approved for the 2nd supplementary. And under the third supplementary, though, the breakout has changed. So we have non-debt expenditure still at 541.4, but above the line is now 503.5. That's a reduction, and the below the line is 37.9, an increase. Public debt service remains at the same 317.6 billion. The numbers revealed is 1920 third supplementary estimate, as indicated, leaves the central government estimates at the level of the second supplementary, that the total non-debt expenditure remains unchanged, but with a reallocation of 2.4 billion from above the line to below the line. Justification for the third supplementary. The third supplementary estimates reflect the reallocation of budgetary space within non-debt expenditure budget. This has been made possible by the slower than programmed execution of elements of the 2019-20 approved budget. Confirmation by MDAs of amounts required to end March 2020 identified balances which would not be spent under the existing program allocations by the end of the fiscal year. These amounts have been redirected towards GOJ's emergency response to the coronavirus disease, facilitating the settlement of arrears and making other critical payments which would otherwise be carried over into the new financial year 2021. The PAAC is asked to note that no adjustments have been made to the 1920 revenue estimates outlined in the second supplementary estimates. So it is just on the expenditure side that we have an adjustment. For capital, approximately $4.45 billion is proposed for reallocation from various capital projects to other areas of spending. This includes $1.3 billion to the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation to meet additional expenditure under the Major Infrastructure Development Project and the Southern Coastal Highway Improvement Project. $453 million for the MIDP and $900 million for SCHIP. $2.1 billion to the Ministry of Health and Wellness to finance the COVID-19 related activities, including the acquisition of drugs and medical supplies, ventilators, and other equipment. $832 million reallocated to Head 20,000, Ministry of Finance and the Public Service recurrent budget to go towards the contingencies fund. Under the recurrent expenditure, the sum proposed for reallocation under the non-debt recurrent budget will facilitate $1.578 billion to the contingencies fund, $372 million to support the COVID-19 response by the JDF, the JCF, and the NSWMA, as well as the JUTC. $1.117 billion to meet other payments, which include $366.5 million to NSWMA to address outstanding arrears to contractors and suppliers of goods and services due to a shortfall in funding from the Parochial Revenue Fund, $250 million to JCF, Jamaica Constabulary Force, to clear outstanding payments related to accommodation, meals, travel expenses, and subsistence resulting from special operations, $280 million to the UWI, representing additional subvention to the institution, and $221 million to the Department of Correctional Services to cover arrears related to payments in lieu of uniforms, prisoners' diet, and other operating expenses. With a reallocation of $832 million from the capital expenditure to the recurrent expenditure, total capital expenditure will move to $71.278 billion, down from $72.11 billion. So 1.2% change. Recurrent spending will move to $787.793 billion, up from $786.961 billion approved in the second supplementary estimates. And this, of course, is reflecting the $832 million that has been transferred from the capital expenditure. We have the details provided in terms of the table form by ministries, departments, and agencies. With respect to the contingencies fund that has been mentioned, Approximately 2.4 billion is proposed for reallocation to the contingencies fund to facilitate rapid disbursement of funds for emergency spending by the government in response to the COVID-19 issue. The contingencies fund, established under Section 13, subsection 1 of the FAA Act, pursuant to Section 118 of the Jamaica Constitution, is held in the Bank of Jamaica and managed by the Accountant General. Both the Constitution, Section 118, and the Financial Administration and Audit Act gives the Minister with responsibility for finance the authority to make advances from the contingencies fund to meet unforeseen expenditure. The 2.4 billion will be released from the consolidated fund through the warrant process and lodged to the contingencies fund in the Bank of Jamaica. In the event that funding is required to address an emergency under the COVID-19 related expenditure, which cannot await the preparation of a warrant, the Minister of Finance may instruct the Accountant General to make advances to MDAs from the contingencies fund up to the limit of 2.4 billion that is being transferred. In keeping with the requirements of the FAA Act, advances from the contingencies fund must be regularized as expenditure by incorporating the sums advanced to the MDAs in a supplementary estimate during the relevant year, tabled for approval of the House of Representatives. The funds transferred to the contingencies fund will therefore impact the primary balance at the point of expenditure. For fiscal year 2019-20, the 2.4 billion to be transferred to the contingencies fund will be captured below the line, and as a result, the primary balance for 1920 will improve to 6.6% of GDP, up from 6.5%. That is essentially it, and of course there's the tables indicating the report, the current and the capital adjustments that have been made.
Okay, thank you. Members, I intend, as we did at the last supplementary, to just take it with regards to the information and just follow the process here. Just two questions, FS. The first, when we met the end of February about the second supplementary, here at the committee there was a discussion because we said, why is it that we had not put any funds in the supplementary for COVID? We were saying at the second supplementary we should have done some, and there was even the discussion of inviting in the Ministry of Health, and we indicated that we would have done that. I think it might have been a little tidier, and while we don't mind coming out and doing this, we would have been a little earlier off the block, but we are now here. We're going to tidy everything that's going from that period back. We're going to tidy. A lot of this is to tidy up expenditure that has already taken place. Am I correct?
Yes. When we did second supplementary, we really did not have, well, at the point where the second supplementary was put together, the magnitude of the response had not yet been revealed. Was not determined at the point where we were doing the supplementary. So while when we were actually here, it had started to, when it was being prepared.
I make the point because while you say that, we did emphasize that we thought something should have been put in even from that period of time. But just on a housekeeping matter, based on what you said in your presentation. So it is expected that we will have, our minister stated he wanted very early in April for us to have a first supplementary to again make the changes to the budget which were unexpected. Now, and that has to be done in the year. So that's why we can't do it today. We have to do it in the financial year, if I understand correctly, in April. But is it my understanding that the funds for this care, for what is being done through that program announced yesterday, will come from the first supplementary of 2020-21, it's not part of this 2019-20 budget. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So, members, are there any general questions? Or can we proceed through? Okay. I will.
Those items which in the submission, FS, that you move the monies from for the reallocation to Ministry of Health, are those funds being provided for, or will you capture that in the first supplementary? Because those are incomplete projects.
Okay, so some of the elements will not recur. Some of the savings is actually arising as a result of the COVID-19, where from as early as January, the public sector essentially ceased any overseas travels, training, a number of things. We were supposed to have a big CDB conference here, for instance. All of that was cancelled. So, yeah, some of it is things that will not recur in the following period.
Chairman, may I just, and this is for my own clarity, the estimates of expenditure, they require, as a precondition to coming here, that there's an opinion expressed by the Auditor General. And I just want to ask whether or not the supplementary estimates require such an opinion.
No, just the estimates. The main
yes, my regret, I'm made
Sorry,
to regret this, but if I understand this clearly, if the larger would include the smaller, and if the larger estimates, the original estimates, require an opinion, why would the smaller not also require? Because that's what is set out there. And I just want the explanation to be given to me so that I clearly understand that what I'm doing, because I'd hate to think that I hear that next week, oh, we didn't comply with the regs or something.
Well, what I can say is that it's not a requirement, but I would turn over to the FS to give us a more technical answer.
No, sir, it is not a requirement based on how the act was set out. The supplementary estimates do not require a sign off.
My understanding, FS, and I'm not the finance person, but my understanding is that the estimates of expenditure deal with the entire revenue expenditure of government, and really what she's commenting on is whether the principles of our economic framework and our fiscal policy framework are being followed in the general estimate. Once that is done, any supplementary is only a reallocation of what is the major budget. So that's my understanding. If you'd like further clarity, certainly, because I know I don't really have much more information than that. But my understanding is that for the main budget, it had been put into the fiscal framework to ensure that the proper, that all our policy pronouncements were put in place, that the framework is correct. Now, the supplementary is only a shuffling of that. So whether you feel it is something that is necessary, I'm certain that that theoretical discussion could take place. But for now. All right, members, I'm going to move to page 2, the details. Let's just start with the capital. You have here approximately 4.45 billion is proposed for reallocation from various capital projects to other areas of spending. These include 1.3 billion to the Ministry of Economic Growth to meet additional expenditure under mid-P. That is 453 million, and SHIP 900 million. Maybe Mr. Hunter, maybe you could just give us a brief breakdown of that expenditure. Yes.
With the kind permission of my permanent secretary,
Oh, sorry, yes, well. Yes,
Absolutely.
Permanent Secretary. Welcome, Permanent Secretary.
Okay, very quickly, Chairman, morning, Chairman, members, very quickly, we are in the final stages of the mid-P project. And as you probably know, the contract is what's called a measured work contract. So, you know, when you are tidying up, the contractor's entitlement is really determined by the value of the work on the ground. And so there will be some changes and some adjustments between what was in the original bills of quantities and what is actually on the ground. We have had to make some changes. So, for example, we have had to increase the number of traffic lights in a very significant way, because originally the traffic lights were predicated on just the intersections. But because of, you know, the propensity of the pedestrian traffic to cross the road at locations other than at the intersections, we've had to put openings in the barrier. And for those openings, we took the decision to install pedestrian actuated traffic signals to improve the safety. So it's really a safety intervention. So whenever pedestrians want to cross the road, they go and they press the light and they are allowed to cross. So that's an addition to what we originally had designed.
So you're saying that the 1.3 billion is really for those mid-P projects, and those mid-P projects would be Mandela, Hagley Park, and Constant Spring?
Right. In fact, Chairman, you recall the mid-P program is a very comprehensive program. It's just that Mandela and Constant Spring tend to be the most visible too, but then as member Vaz will attest, we did significant work at Macfield.
Okay, so all of those.
So all of those. We're in the process now of tidying up the entire program.
No, and no problem. I don't think we have to go in, members, to the details of everyone, but point I'm trying to make is it says here additional expenditure. So these are additional over budgeted.
Yes, it would be.
All right. And the ship project?
And the ship...
Which project is that?
The South Coast.
Okay.
That's what I was... Okay, so the PS was asking, do I want to say what caused the additional? So I was saying the additional was occasioned by improvements that we've made to the overall project. So, for example, the inclusion of the additional lights, the water component, which was added subsequently, so additional works there. More boundary walls that we had to put in than was originally in the program. Because as you get to the end of the program, you know, all the affected parties, all the property owners, any issues that they have, they come to the fore with it, and we try to ameliorate their concerns. So although it is additional expenditure, it is expenditure which is germane to a more elegant completion of the exercise.
Well, Mr. Chair, I have a perennial issue with these supplemental expenses and what is programmed. When the roads were being designed, the population don't change, right? The usage pattern, you either know it or you can contemplate it based upon what your proposed roadway design, like for the passenger, the pedestrian walkway and so forth. I dare to submit that this speaks to, quite bluntly, improper or inadequate project planning. I will only be accepting of things which cannot be contemplated, like you're building a road and the soil, well, you're supposed to do your geotech work to find out the soil type where you're going to build. But where you have unexpected physical situation unraveling or revealing itself, that you could not reasonably contemplate before, that you deal with those as what would come in your contingencies subsequently. But things like pedestrian and traffic light and all of that, we're very blunt, Chairman. I have one instance that I can speak to in my own constituency, where the proposed design never make provision for the management of the traffic at both ends of the road being upgraded, and that had to be redone because it just couldn't work. So I hear you, Mr. Hunter, but I don't take much comfort.
May I respond to? Okay, Member Jackson, let's lay out the facts of the...
I welcome the additional cost to fix that problem.
Let's lay out the facts of the case to which you have alluded. Our original design for the Port Henderson Road called for signalization of one of the intersection and the retention of the roundabout as was there for the last 40 years. That was the design. Now, so you can't argue that the retention of a roundabout that had been there and functional for 40 years, because we did not propose to change that, then that was somehow inadequate. So the point I'm making is this. What I said before, Chairman, is that we made some adjustment to have a more elegant finish. And the elegance of the finish, Member Jackson, if you want to be totally candid, you and I had at least 100 conversations about the need to signalize the second roundabout, yeah? And we did our examination and we agreed that although the second intersection could remain as is with the roundabout, it would have been a more elegant finish if we signalized the second intersection. So it had nothing to do with a deficit in planning. It only had to do with the fact that we concluded that a more elegant finish would be afforded if we did signalization at the two locations as opposed to signalization at one location, okay. Member Jackson.
All right. No.
One last.
I don't intend to have this.
I must.
I'm going to put a red light to this discussion.
Yes, please. After I just made one little small insertion. Mr. Chairman, I cannot match the CEO with elegance of words, right? And I won't even attempt to go down that road. But I just make one substantive submission. Yes, one of the roundabout been there for 40 years, but it's because of the increased volume of traffic in that corridor. Why the roadway need to be increased from one lane either way to two lane, either way to a 4-lane stretch. Because of the increase in traffic volume along there. Because of that increase, the intersection had to be upgraded from the roundabout to the traffic light to more efficiently handle the traffic. That is my only submission. But as I said, I will never attempt. It is more elegant with the traffic light, yes, but I know Mr. Hunter's elegance is even more so than the traffic light.
Well, Mr. Hunter, I think the basic philosophy that Member Jackson spoke to is just a general principle of, you know, when we get 1.3 billion to meet additional expenditure, it then to members, it is just a thing that we're not saying that what was done was not necessary. What we're saying is that when we're planning a project and we get a cost for a project, there are going to be certain overruns. But when you get these and the extent, etc., it is something just on principle that we put on the table.
Just for accuracy, 1.3 billion is not for over expenditure. 450 million is for additional works on the mid-P, and the remainder is for the South Coast, which again, and
All right.
And the South Coast provision
the
is
453,
entirely...
all right,
Right.
yes, my mistake, exactly.
sir.
453
Yeah.
is the amount for mid-P, absolutely.
Yeah.
But the philosophical discussion is we really, the closer we can get to not having these, is the more efficient that we will be becoming as we go along.
May I just, for accuracy, make one final point, Chairman? I've been making this point for the last 4 years, and somehow we seem to forget it. If you recall, the Mid-P program in its original construct did not have the water and sewage element to it. We subsequently added that element, or those two elements, to the program 2.5 years into the implementation. Now, the consequence of that is that there were scope changes which arose naturally from adding water and sewage to a project which was ostensibly a road project only. And so, for example, on Mandela, the road works would have been concluded at the bridge at 6 miles. When the water element was added, the pipeline works had to be extended to the intersection at Corville. So once you've done that, then you need to extend the road works.
Yeah, but what I think, just looking at it from tidying up these things, what may be useful for us, what you have here is to meet additional expenditure. So the immediate response of members is that these are either unplanned or overruns. That's the immediate thing. What I'm saying is that once you change those scopes, I think that the best thing to do is for us to try and capture them into some document which is also funded. And once you have that, so you have a program which would be the Mandela Highway, and then you would have a program is sewage and water for Mandela Highway, cost 453. And then because our job is to be able to match work to expenditure. So when you say to us that there's a job, and if you tell me I'm going to fix my house, and it's going to cost $10 million for my house, the fact of the matter is if you come afterwards and tell me $12 million, that's about $2 million over. Now we could have a long argument, and then you may turn to me and say, but you asked me to build an additional bathroom. That's a different thing. So additional work needs to be captured in an additional program that is brought to us, so that if we have that before, we can judge that work after as well. And I'm just saying that some of what we have here it makes it more difficult for us, because you see a project at the end of the day that should have costed $1 billion, and then when it's a 1.4 billion, you're like, wow. There has to be approval for it to get the additional work before, and then we need to look and see how well it was executed after. But I don't think we need to, members, yes.
Mr. Hunter, this additional expenditure which you speak of, which would involve the sewage, and is there an arrangement with NWC? Because that, I think, in the true context, ought to be an expense borne by NWC. Is there an arrangement between yourself and why would it reflect on your books as opposed to on NWC's?
It's the ministry's book, not NWA's books per se. So yes, there's an arrangement, and when policy decisions are taken, for example, the water situation, invariably there is going to be an increase in cost. And so the ministry would take the lead in terms of the negotiation of the funding with the ministry and bringing together of the both entities, NWC and NWA. But it's reflected under the program. The program is one that is owned by the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation. It's not reflected under NWA's finances. Yes.
But for an entity like NWC, which gets audited, and how do you reflect an additional cost in any financial year of $453 million. If that is not transferred...
Under the GOJ program, it's under GOJ because it becomes a part of the MID-P, the Major Infrastructure Development Program. So the GOJ contributed the additional amount. I don't think the additional amount was part of the loan, that those funds were from GOJ, funded from the consolidated fund. So it's reflected on the ministry's books, hence the reason I'm here.
Very well.
So, Chairman, if I may just make one last point. So, learning from the experience of the MID-P, the government has taken a decision that from henceforth, any roadworks program that is being undertaken, the water and sewage requirements of the areas where these roads are being done will be addressed simultaneously. And so on the South Coast project, which we are now doing, there's a water and sewage element in that program at day one. So you won't see a subsequent change in the cost of the South Coast consequent on the water program being brought in afterwards. So it is in the program at day one, which makes a lot of sense.
Which is the point I was trying to make.
Yeah, so that's how it's done now.
Can we move on to the South Coast Highway? All right, is this the St. Thomas, or is there? I understand South Coast Highway includes Williamsfield as well, so I'm not certain.
It does.
Yeah, but this additional sum addresses specifically the Harbour View to Port Antonio component.
So what is being done here?
Okay, so again, very quickly, the Harbour View, the Port Antonio component is in two parts. So there's Harbour View to Yallas Bridge, which is new road, new alignment, new turf, and that is being done by CHEC itself. And under that segment of the program.
So let me just get this straight. The South Coast Highway, the agreement is with CHEC. They're the overall contractors for the entire project.
Right.
There are sections they will do.
Right.
As you said, this section, Harbour View to
Yallas Bridge.
Yallas Bridge is entirely them. And then there's a section that you're going to use subcontractors. Am I correct?
Right, local subcontractors. And that's written in the contract.
Let me ask a question. Is there a cost, our local contractors, is there a percentage that's taken out to pay CHEC on a project? So, for example, if there's a road, let's say I get 5 miles of road, 10 miles of road as my subcontract. So I'm a contractor, I'm going to fix this road. It is, China Harbour is the main contractor, so now I fix it. Is there a fixed fee that CHEC would get just out of this for this project?
Okay, so let me address the general principle. The general principle is that when a contractor does work, the owner has the right to suggest a subcontractor, and that's called a nominated subcontractor. And how it works on the contract, when the owner can nominate a subcontractor, the main contractor has the right to reject, but with reason. Yeah. So that is option one. Option two is where the main contractor itself elects to use subcontractors. Where the owner nominates a subcontractor, as in this case, literally we're nominating subcontractors, the main contractor gets a markup. And for CHEC by contract, CHEC gets, I think, 12.5% markup on what the local subcontractor does. And that is it is the government of Jamaica that prescribes that certain elements of the work should be subcontracted to local subcontractor, and that's by contract.
So they get the 12.5%, but that would be on top of what they get.
There's no on top. So that portion of the works is, all check gets is the 12.5%.
Yes, but,
Yeah.
sorry, I'll come to Mr. Jackson, but point I'm making is, let's say there's a section of road and it costs $10 million to fix that section of road. They would have put
No.
a bid for that.
No, but when you say that costs 10, what's that 10? What does that 10 involve?
The actual, you would have done an estimate. You would have an idea of what the cost of that, the basic cost of that road would be.
Yeah, but that's not how contracts are priced.
Yeah.
They're what you call the prime cost, which is material, whatever,
Right.
whatever,
Yeah.
and then there's always overheads and profit for anybody who does the work. So from an accounting point of view, you bring to book the total cost of the works.
Yeah.
So how it works, how it goes is that the government, in its wisdom, decided that a portion of these works are to be done, certain portions of these works are to be done by local subcontractors. So that's a policy prescription.
No,
Yeah.
I'm not saying no. What I'm trying to do, at the end of the day, what we really want to break down is what the cost of building a road, are we getting absolute money for value? And there's an issue in that. So there's an overall cost, and so that's how we just want to make sure within the context. But none of us, I think, in here are engineers.
Yeah, but Mr.
So I'm just trying to get a figure. But if, as I said, you are at a position where the main contractor gets X, the second contractor gets Y, but there's also a negotiation that brought it in. We just want to make sure what is it that sort of protects this general value of what the cost of a mile. In other words, at the end of the day, how many miles of road are we doing?
Okay, so all right, let me tell you the principle, Chairman. Once by policy a certain portion of the work is designated for local subcontractors, those works are then tendered. So the works are done at market rates. And that is how you ensure that you're getting value for money. Because when everything is said and done, tendering is the best mechanism by which you determine value for money. And that's an international standard. So those works are tendered and are awarded to local subcontractors. Now, the main contractor, so if you're putting up this building and you're going to put in elevators, you would go to an elevator contractor, Otis or whomever, and you would pay Otis for what Otis does. However, the main contractor, because how the contract is worded is that notwithstanding the engagement of subcontractor, the main contractor is still responsible for the performance of the subcontractor. So things like insurance and superintendents, making sure that whatever goes wrong is the main contractor.
Don't get me wrong. Let me just say, what I'm trying to get at is this. You have what's the stretch of road? How many miles is this South Coast Highway, that section we're dealing with? That's how long? How much road?
112 kilometers.
112 kilometers. And you have a basic idea of what the cost of the total contract is? That's the point I'm making. Let me tell you why.
Yeah, tell me why.
Because you see, what you're saying is that there has to be a determined cost somewhere along the line for us to know, for us to decide to build the road.
Yeah.
If I know the road is 112 miles and it costs me $1 million US a mile, I know it costs me $112 million. So I know what to look forward to, that you have an overrun or not.
Yeah, no, but Chairman, the question is when you say costs, whatever, what is it that makes up that cost? Yeah, and I'm saying to you, Chairman, that overhead markup and profit, that's an integral part of the cost of any deliverable.
I'm not
It is
disagreeing.
inescapable.
No, I'm not disagreeing with that.
Okay.
No,
Insurance.
don't get me wrong. No, don't get me wrong.
Okay.
No, I think maybe you're protecting
No,
something
no,
with
no,
a
no.
flank that is not
No,
under
no,
attack.
no.
Hold on. No, let me just say to you, what I'm getting at is that there must be a basic cost of this project. There was a contract. They have gotten a contract for this project, China Harbour. There's
Yes,
a cost,
yeah.
and the cost of that is what?
$193 million for the entire corridor.
So you're looking at about 1.5, 1.6 million dollars per mile.
On average, but you're not comparing apples with apples.
Because
with
you have
apples,
some
because
bridge here,
the
you have to have some
segment from
sand.
Harborview to Yalas is a different design than the segment from Yalas to Port
But I'm
Antonio.
not, but no, but I'm only making the point. So if you have this cost
Right.
at the start, then what it says to you going forward is that no matter what the tender of the road goes out, no matter what the tender for the road by the subcontractors, the main contractor has to be able to fit it within this 1.5 million per mile. That's the point I'm making.
Right,
It's
yes.
not because you were saying the best way to get it is by tendering. It almost seems like it's fluid. Like depending on that, then there's a 12%, etc., which is what I was trying to get. I'm just trying to understand the structure. So in effect, what you have is a contract that was signed off by you.
Right.
Which,
And they have to
which
fit within
indicates-
that limit. Yes, they have to fit within that limit. So the question then becomes, okay, so from Yalas to Port Antonio, there are 15 packages. The question is, what is the price for each package? And what we're saying is that each package is designed, each package has an estimated cost. But that's just an estimated cost. The real cost or the market price for each package is what the tendering exercise determines. And even when
Yeah, but
tenders
at the
come back,
end
we
of the day,
negotiate.
the savings on that go to the main contractor.
No.
No, but then I don't. But then I'm not understanding.
It's
I don't.
simple,
I mean,
Mr. Chairman, it's
Yeah.
very, very simple. I don't see the difficulty.
Yes, but
If you
I'm not a contractor. so I
well,
have
you don't have to be a
difficulty.
contractor. If you are doing a contract, based upon my understanding, the cost of the project is input, implement, and estimated markup. That's the cost of the contract. Now, what will happen? The 12% that check will get will be a part of the estimated markup on the project. So if the estimated markup is 30%, of that, check will get 12%, and the local contractor get the remaining. So you end up right back at where you would have estimated the markup to be. That's my understanding. It's simple. I don't know.
So
Well,
then a
no,
fair
hold on,
question,
no, but
Chairman,
remember-
would be,
but remember-
a fair question would be, what it is that check does for that 12.5% markup?
No. I think we're
Yeah.
not. There's a misunderstanding. Please, let me just. Maybe it's my not speaking as elegantly as I should. Let me just say this. I'm simply saying that my understanding is that the actual main contract went out previously. That we have a contract between the government of Jamaica and Czech to build a road of 112 kilometers, and the cost is 193 million.
Right.
Now, you are going to be monitoring that all the things that you wanted in there are in that contract and done properly,
Right.
and that there are other contractors who are going to be involved in the packages in doing it.
Right.
But the price, all this 12%, all these things really fall within that 190.
Absolutely.
Once you
Absolutely.
go over that 193
Yeah.
million,
Yeah. Okay.
it's a problem.
Okay. So
I'm
how-
just saying that
Yeah.
just for the package,
Yeah.
and I suppose this contract is broken into all these segments, that package would have a cost.
Yes.
But that is your idea of what the tender will be.
Right.
But in that is built in the 12.5%
Right,
that would
right.
go to the...
And so whenever we tender and the tender results come back, we compare the price that the contractors have quoted with what we have there as the estimated costs. And then there is a process then. And then if the disparity between our estimated costs and the contractor's bid price is above a certain amount, then there's a process of negotiation. And, and that negotiation continues until we have shrunk the difference. And it is only when the estimated price and the contractor's price reach a certain difference that we would then go to contract. So that's how it works.
Just for me to finish up, again, I'm just saying, is when we were doing the initial discussions some years ago at this committee, there was a discussion about this road was supposed to, we were thinking of doing this road as a toll road, I think was the original thought. And at that point it was determined it was not going to be done like that, that it was going to be this use road. One of the reasons for it not to be done as a toll road was the cost at the time. So I simply say to you, I mean, as a person who, while not knowing anything about construction of roads, have found myself forced to be involved in many roads in my constituency, and I have a general figure of what a road in my constituency would cost. I just say that because it would say that even on average, 1.5 million US per kilometer is that would be more in keeping with the cost of a toll road.
No, sir. A toll road is 12 million US per kilometer. Yeah.
I beg your pardon?
Yeah.
They pave it with gold.
Yes. No, I'm saying that is what it is. No, I'm saying that is what it is. And finally, let me say as well, Chairman, that this maneuver is not unique. Under the Mid-P program, as I've been saying for the last 4 years, the Mid-P program is in 3 components. There was a Jeep Hope program, the 50 million that each MP had a say in. That was $50 million. Check, and again, remember, by policy, by contract, that component was undertaken by local subcontractors. Yeah. Check got its markup of 12.5%. That's Mid-P. Secondly, there was another component, Chairman, there's another component of Mid-P, the $82 million component, which again, by contract, was to be done by local subcontractors. So all the projects in rural Jamaica, your constituency, every member here, its constituency, were done by local subcontractors. Check got 12.5% markup.
Yeah, but I only say
so it's the same principle.
Yeah, but I'm just saying the cost per kilometer of those roads was a fraction. That's the only point.
No, Chairman. That is the same. Is the same. The construct. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the major part of this program here, the South Coast, is the new road from Harborview to Yallas. That is going to be 4 lanes with Jersey barrier down the middle. And it will look like the Constant Spring or Hagley Park Road, which is new construction. From Harborview, from Yallas to Port Antonio, it's really an upgrade of like the existing alignment.
North Coast Highway.
Right. So if you attempt to do an average cost, the segment from Harborview to Yallas is going to distort that figure because it's a totally different construct.
All right. We will be building the North Coast Highway, the South Coast Highway for quite a while. So I think I think today we are more on the thing. What I think Member Jackson, Member Stuart.
Listening to the exchange, I just ask one simple question, Mr. Hunter. The $193 million for that South Coast Highway constitute the total of what the government of Jamaica commitment will be? With all the tendering and all that you're mentioning, does it, all the process involved, can this number change? Because I take it you arrived at this number from negotiation
Member Jackson.
with
Okay.
check.
Only if you need some stoplights.
Okay, so let me answer that. First of all, those figures don't include land, okay? Now, from a cost from a cost accounting point of view, if you really want to determine the value of the asset that you're going to take to book, then you roll in everything, okay?
Let me make it easier.
So,
Let me make
yeah.
it easier. The 193 million
That's for road works.
for road work.
Right.
I take it that your land acquisition might be separate. And removal of utilities.
yeah.
Because that's the government of Jamaica's responsibility.
Right, yeah.
And you have costed those already.
They're separate, but they're separate.
But you have costed them already.
We are in the process of finalizing those costs.
They don't form part of this contract.
Yes, yes. But and there goes part of my problem,
Right.
Mr. Chairman. This is a project. It has many elements to it. It has the road, physical road construction, which you engage a contractor with.
Right,
It has land acquisition.
right.
It has utility relocation, right, in it, and any other associated, because in designing the project, you would have driven the length of the road, surveyed and established all the elements relating to where you are proposing to put the road. You'll factor in all those elements to come up with an overall project cost, for which the physical construction is but one. I would believe that before you make a decision to go ahead with a project, you would have established what those, at the very least, indicative costs.
Member Jackson.
But I'm really just
Member
concerned for
Jackson.
now about the 193.
Member Jackson, let's have a little bet here. You show me any contract anywhere in the world that what you have described obtains. Because what you're talking about is the price of perfect information. And the price of perfect, I'm coming to that. The price of perfect information is unaffordable. Nobody does that in any undertaking. What you do, you do your surveys, you do your studies, you do your tests. There will always be elements which you can't define perfectly at day one. And so you put in your contract things called provisional sums. So you do an estimate. Because if you are to wait until you have perfect information, you will never get the project done.
You're answering a question I never asked.
Yeah.
I did say
Yeah.
indicative costs, which would include what
so,
you're
so
referring
then,
to.
so let us agree that an indicative cost is an indicative cost. We, in a contract, we call it a contingency or a provisional sum. Which,
All right,
which
members.
when you do the actual work, and that's why all these contracts are what's called measured works contracts. So notwithstanding what is in the contract, at the end of the day, the contractor is paid for what is on the ground. That's why it's called a measured work contract. And that's an international convention. So we're on the same page.
Basically what you're saying is the contract addresses what you propose as a work. But when you're doing the work,
Yeah.
as issues arise, you have
You
to
deal with it,
variation.
right.
Members, I'm going to, members, yes, but members,
When in the earlier project with Czech, when we insisted on having local contractors, they asked for additional markup for profit for themselves. I remember
they asked-
when it moved from 15,
They
from
asked for
20 to
23%.
25%.
Yeah, 25%, right. But the records have shown that the government of the day and the government of today negotiated and agreed at 12.5%.
all right, members, please, I'm going to
down.
ask, we have a ways to go, and we have to do the report for Parliament, so I'm going to ask members. Member Stewart has wanted to make a comment for some time, so I'll allow him. But as I said, I think these projects, well, certainly the ship project will be with us for a little while. So let us move on from there. But Member Stewart, yes,
Quickly,
sir.
thank you, Chairman. Through you to Mr. Hunter or the PS. I have not heard any mention of the other leg of the South Coast Highway, Maypen to Williamsfield. I know that work is proposed to get started or should have started
Is
this week.
any of this 900 million part of it, I would suspect? No? When do you, what's the...
Yeah, that's NROC, but I can tell you from what I know, they've started site clearance, so that contract has actually started.
Which was the point I was making earlier. This South Coast Highway Improvement Project, basically what you're doing with China Harbor is really...
Eastern part.
Exactly, from Harbor View to Port Antonio.
Yeah.
The other project in Williamsfield is part of a South Coast high...
It's the same project,
But it's not done by you.
No, by NROC.
It's by a different... Exactly.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that is stolen.
Absolutely. Understood. All right. Members, is there anything else we would need, Mr. Hunter? Is there any other? This was the only variation for you. We normally like to leave you till last, you know, because you disrupt the meeting. You disrupt the meeting with the, you know, you always elicit some response from members.
I have a side visit to go look at the, what's the name of the road in Member Jackson's constituency? The Port Edison Road. I have to make sure.
All right, so, yes, Mr. Hunter, Mr. Downer, thanks, and PS, thanks a lot. I don't know if, is there anything else with the Ministry of Economic Growth, or that's it? Okay, thanks a lot. All right, now I want to move on to the Ministry of Health. I understand the Chief Medical Officer is with us, and yes, the Chief Medical Officer, and I know we would certainly want we'd certainly like to allow her to get back to to business, difficult period of time. But we noticed this $2.1 million to the Ministry of Health and Wellness to finance the related activities, and the acquisition of drugs, medical supplies, ventilators, and other equipment. A couple of questions. First, FS. This is the first additional funding that the Ministry of Health is going to get?
Yes, this would be the first.
This is the first.
Budget. Yeah.
But I understand some of the work, acquisitions of what have already started. What we're really doing is trying to put in place, regularize it.
Yes.
And in the first supplementary, the bulk of the funds that will be needed by the Ministry of Health will be addressed in the first supplementary of the next year's budget.
Okay,
or
so I cannot speak to whether it is the bulk of the funds. The first supplementary will seek to address issues arising under the COVID-19. So it's not just related to the Ministry of Health.
Not just the health, I got you.
Right.
Yes, okay, I understand. All right, right, is the Chief Medical Officer, right? Is it, or Permanent Secretary? Okay, so we have everybody sitting socially distant. Okay, setting an example. Okay, the PS, just as a matter, could you just give us a little overview of what we're dealing with here?
Okay, thank you, Chairman. So joining me as well today is the Principal Financial Officer, Mr. Donovan Davis.
Could we indicate whoever you are?
So
just let me know who your team is, just so that,
the
and identify yourself so that the answer right.
So my name is Dunstan Bryan. I'm the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Health and Wellness. So the response to date has been first in the phases of our intervention. The first phase being our delay strategies to prevent the advent of the first case. and that involved our restrictions, our travel restrictions, and then subsequent to that, our quarantining operations. To date, we have in operation 3 major quarantine facilities, and we have isolation facilities at all hospitals across the island. The operation since the advent of our first case on March 10 then moved into our containment strategies. And our containment strategies had to do with contact tracing and also the isolation of persons who were positive for COVID-19. So each of these operations required us to expand our capacity in terms of resources in the areas of equipment, in the areas of accommodation. We also had to retrofit several facilities in order to accommodate the new procedures and protocols for isolation and quarantine. We had to provide additional staff and additional equipment and resources. And we also had to expand our fleet of vehicles to do the necessary operations in terms of moving patients and moving staff, in terms of the logistics of the operation that we were under. We prepared an initial budget to the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service for approximately $2.1 billion, of which we have received 100% of that request. However, as we move through the different stages of the operation, and as we move from what we are going to identify as local spread to a community spread, the operation is having, our plans indicate that operation will require significant additional resources. We are also experiencing some significant.
But you have gotten the 2.1, which I take it is what you needed now.
Yes.
And certainly when we do the first supplementary, it would include whatever. I think that we're all committed, and certainly I think government to your needs at this point. But in terms of this budget, you could give us a sort of breakdown as to what this 2.1 entails?
So of the 2.1, approximately $500 million was put to the purchasing of medical equipment, and this included ventilators and the IPs, infection prevention and control supplies that were required for hospitals, and some other small supplies that we procured. 16 million has been made for accommodation, for different types of accommodations and the requirement for accommodation. 3.2 has been spent on catering services to supply to the quarantine sites and for the emergency operating center. $944 million has been transferred to the regions to provide support to their operation at the local level, and of this also $200 million was transferred to University Hospital of the West Indies to bolster their infrastructure to respond. We have had to spend $4.4 million for computer network installation to augment the services and to keep the communication channels open. Based on infrastructure work, we have spent $63 million to retrofit St. Joseph Hospital and the other quarantine facilities that we have, and we have also spent some resources to retrofit hospitals for the COVID wards that are being established. We have had to do some rehabilitation to our emergency operating center, so we had to procure furniture, and we have had to purchase $42 million worth of vehicles to bolster our transportation fleet to manage the logistics of the operation that we are under. We have also transferred...
How many vehicles are you expecting to get?
So we procured 3 vehicles in all, 2 15-seater.
Okay, so they're more transportation of personnel.
Yes.
Okay.
Movement of staff and other.
That's what I want to ask.
And then we have $500 million that we transferred to the National Health Fund to support the procurement of additional drugs.
All right. Is that it?
Yes, that covers.
Just a few questions. You said ventilators. How many ventilators are you purchasing?
So at this point in time, we are purchasing an additional 40 ventilators.
When did you order those ventilators?
Those ventilators were ordered about 2 weeks ago, 2 to 3 weeks ago, to support the existing capacity that we have. The ventilators are being procured through the National Health Fund.
All right, so you really ordered those 2 to 3 weeks ago, and the staff to man them. There's a training of that taking place now?
Yes, the Chief Medical Officer can speak more definitively to the training that is taking place. But there are 2 strategies that we are utilizing. We are augmenting.
Bringing in some.
We have already.
Maybe we should just move over.
Yeah. The CMO might not want me so close to her, but.
No, we can't afford for either of you to.
That's right. So we have. So we are augmenting staff within the health facilities, but we have also reached out to the Cuban government, and we have received 140 additional.
That include people to man.
Yes.
All right. These ventilators will be put to most of the hospitals around the country, so that there's a distribution of it. Right?
Yes.
All right. The test kits. Have you also purchased test kits?
So the University Hospital of the West Indies, in collaboration with the National Influenza Center, has been reviewing test kit protocols to determine which test kit would be most appropriate for the Jamaican environment. And they have submitted a report that is being reviewed by the clinical team, and a decision will be made shortly around which test kit will be bought.
So what are you using now?
We are using PCR tests, test kits, but I'll allow the CMO to speak specifically to the type of PCR.
There's a little bit of confusion because we refer to them all as kits. But usually when people think about kits, they're thinking about rapid tests. So the asking for additional test kits are asking for rapid test kits. But the kits that we get from PAHO and are to also get from the CDC are really large kits that uses reagents that we have to go through a process of extracting the virus from whatever sample and then testing the extracted sample. Those kits, the initial kit that we got from PAHO was able to do 96 tests. The second kit that we got from PAHO is able to do over 2,000, between 2,000 to 3,000 tests. What has been investigated by the University of the West Indies is looking at rapid tests that we would be able to put in each individual hospital for them to be able to do a rapid test kit. Now, there has to be an algorithm to say how it is that we validate, because the sensitivity and specificity of these tests are not going to be they're not going to be 100%. Most of the kits are really looking at the response, the antibody response to the virus, not looking at the presence of the virus itself. Okay, and we realize that right across the world, people are developing these kits, and more become available. As they become available, they are being validated against the PCR testing, which is looking at the virus itself. It's testing for the virus. That is why it is a confirmatory test. So the antibody test kits, we would have to use a validation process to be able to confirm with the ones that are positive and to say how reliable a negative test is. Because you are going to have the incidence of false positives based on the timing of the test, because you're looking at the response, not the virus itself.
So, having said that, if somebody in Westmoreland, St. James, St. Thomas is feeling sick, how do you test them now?
Now the samples are brought into the National Public Health Lab and they're tested at the National Influenza Center.
So you have to bring everything to...
Everything comes in. Mm-hmm.
And that is what you're saying, that may not be the most efficient way to work.
Well, no, I have not said that.
Well, let me know. Well, then why? Because it would seem to me that the rapid, you're seeking to get the rapid test kit.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the question, how do we move forward from here once the numbers come up? And I'm just making the point that you are going to have this in areas around.
Mm-hmm.
Is the most efficient way for everything to come to one central, or are you moving to get a rapid test kit? In other words, we have gotten some samples from PAHO, but I'm getting the impression we have not really moved forward to get the test kits or which test kit we are going to use going forward. Right. That's what I'm trying to understand. Is that correct? Or?
Yeah, that is somewhat correct. I mean, right now, and what is happening in Jamaica is happening internationally, because you want to have reliable testing. And the most reliable testing right now is a PCR testing. Extract the virus and test for it.
But is what they're doing in places with large numbers, getting the test kits, putting them out there where you can test in the communities, and where you do get a positive, you can then send it on for definitive. But in moving quickly and doing what you have to do.
We have to validate the test kits. So a lot of manufacturers all over the world, but the test kits have not been properly validated. So we are getting in the samples from the manufacturers, and this is what the university is doing. It's validating those kits.
With all that's going on around the world, is people, I mean, wouldn't New York, wouldn't these places, Italy, New York, UK, aren't they using rapid test kits?
I believe that the FDA has recently approved one rapid PCR kit. So a lot of people are using kits that are not validated. You know, you have to be very, very careful how it is that you use those kits, because you give a negative result when a negative result is going to be dependent on the timing of the test. So we have to be careful in our validation process that whatever kits that we get, we look at the information, we look at the validation process that is happening in other countries, and then we are validating them against our positives and negatives that we are presently doing.
All right, I only say this, because we are in the midst of a crisis, and it's not just Jamaica, it's global. And it may seem to many looking on that while we are going through all this process, that other places are using test kits, they're moving, getting to this point, because the earlier you get in and deal with it, the better. And, you know, I'm just hoping that in all this time that we are evaluating the all the test kits and all these things, that we are basically losing some time on the ground in what needs to be done? Are we doing enough testing? Do we have enough on hand to test everybody and do everything that needs to be done in a timely manner?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by everybody. I mean,
Well,
because...
no, in other words, a wide scope. If, for example, there's an area we're doing within the community, you could always, you're going to test the contacts, but there's always an area where you can be conservative or you can be aggressive in your testing. I'm saying that depending on how many you have, you tend to be more conservative or more aggressive. I think we here would feel more comfortable with a very aggressive program, but that depends on us having the supplies, the capacity to do it. So all we're saying is we're hoping that we are not being so conservative in our approach that we end up losing some of the battle. That's all I'm
Our
saying.
testing protocol now is that all suspected cases we test. A suspected case would be a case that would have the symptoms and would have the contact history. We're also testing...
Right, go ahead.
We're also testing what we call persons under investigation. They have a contact history, but they may not have all the symptoms that fit the case definition. They may have some. Then we are testing all the symptomatic contacts of the confirmed cases that we have. And then in terms of the general population, we have extended our testing to all severe acute respiratory infections that come into hospital across the island, whether or not there's any contact, whether or not there's any travel history. We are also testing, sampling from every health center and every hospital, 1 in 10 sampling of everybody that presents with an influenza-like illness, whether or not there's a travel history or a contact. So that provides us a network right across the island, because we have over 200 health centers, plus we have 25 hospitals. So,
but how many tests have you done so far? How many tests have we done so far?
So far, we have done 184 tests.
You see, that's the point I'm making, and mostly you're gearing towards persons that are symptomatic. You're entail. I'm just...
So earlier this week, the government implemented several measures that we're going to talk about today. The Prime Minister has invited a very, very illustrious, I'd call it, panel to help you get your questions answered and, of course, deal with all the concerns you have. The Prime Minister certainly has zeroed in on this particular population. 13% of the entire Jamaican population fall within this vulnerable group, so it's very important that we speak to you today.